Sometimes the hardest part of a phone call is not the conversation. It is the 5 seconds before you answer, the staring, the overthinking, the strange feeling that hearing another person's voice in real time is somehow too much. And if you are Gen Z, there is a good chance you have felt this before. Not because you are antisocial, but because your brain was raised in a world where you could edit yourself before being seen. So, what happens when that control suddenly disappears? And why are simple phone calls starting to feel emotionally threatening to an entire generation? Sometimes the hardest part of a phone call is not the conversation. It is the 5 seconds before you answer, the staring, the overthinking, the strange feeling that hearing another person's voice in real time is somehow too much. And if you are Gen Z, there is a good chance you have felt this before. Not because you are antisocial, but because your brain was raised in a world where you could edit yourself before being seen. So, what happens when that control suddenly disappears? And why are simple phone calls starting to feel emotionally threatening to an entire generation? But before moving ahead in the video, please subscribe to the video call channel. You stare at the phone for a few seconds too long, not because you do not know what to say, but because the moment it rings, your body reacts like something dangerous is about to happen. Your chest tightens. Your brain starts rehearsing conversations before they even happen. You hope they stop calling so you can text instead. And the strange part is, you can talk for hours online, voice notes, group chats, memes, paragraphs, but a live phone call feels different, more intense, more exposing. And for a lot of Gen Z, this is becoming normal, not just uncomfortable, actually stressful. So why does something as simple as hearing another person's voice in real time suddenly feel emotionally overwhelming? And why does your brain treat a phone call more like a threat than a conversation? A lot of people assume this is just social awkwardness or poor communication skills. But that explanation is too shallow, because many people who hate phone calls are not antisocial at all. They are emotionally intelligent, funny, creative, good at expressing themselves through text. Some are even confident in person. Yet the moment a phone starts ringing unexpectedly, something changes. And that reaction usually starts long before the call even begins. You see the caller ID, and instantly your brain opens 10 tabs at once. What do they want? Did I forget something? What if I sound awkward? What if there's silence? What if I respond too slowly? What if my tone sounds wrong? Your brain starts simulating social mistakes before the interaction even happens. This is called anticipatory anxiety, the brain's habit of trying to predict and prevent social discomfort before it occurs. And Gen Z experiences this more intensely than previous generations for a reason, because most of your communication was built in environments with control. Texting gives you time. You can pause, edit, delete, rethink your tone. You can manage how you appear before another person sees it. But phone calls remove that buffer completely. In psychology, this is connected to something called impression management, the human tendency to control how other people perceive us. And digital communication quietly trained your brain to expect that control all the time. Texting became emotionally safe because it reduced unpredictability. Phone calls do the opposite. They force real-time exposure. No editing, no delay, no emotional armor, just you reacting live. And for a nervous system already overloaded by constant self-awareness, that feels exhausting, especially because Gen Z grew up during an era of permanent observation. Social media did not just change communication, it changed self-consciousness itself. Previous generations embarrassed themselves in small rooms. This generation embarrasses itself in permanent digital memory. So the brain adapts. It becomes hyper-aware of tone, timing, pauses, delivery. You begin monitoring yourself while speaking instead of simply speaking. And phone calls amplify that monitoring. Because unlike texting, you cannot carefully construct yourself sentence by sentence. You have to exist in real time. This is where something important happens psychologically. The fear is usually not the conversation itself. The fear is exposure. Phone calls create what psychologists call synchronous communication, meaning both people must emotionally react at the same time. And that creates pressure. Your brain suddenly has to multitask, listen, interpret tone, predict reactions, choose words, regulate emotion, maintain social rhythm all at once. For some nervous systems, especially anxious or overstimulated ones, this creates cognitive overload, like opening too many apps on an old phone until everything starts freezing. That is why some people avoid answering calls even from people they love. Not because they do not care, but because their brain associates live interaction with performance pressure. And here's the strange contradiction. Gen Z is one of the most connected generations in history, yet many people feel less socially confident in unstructured conversation. Because connection is not the same as practice. Previous generations accidentally trained social resilience through repetition, ordering food, calling landlines, talking to strangers, asking questions without preparation. Tiny moments of unpredictability trained the nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. But modern communication reduced many of those repetitions. Now discomfort can be avoided instantly, and the brain learns from avoidance very quickly. In behavioral psychology, avoided discomfort becomes reinforced behavior. Every time you avoid a stressful call and choose texting instead, your nervous system experiences relief. And relief teaches the brain, good, avoid that again. So the fear quietly grows. Not because you are weak, but because your brain is becoming efficient at escape. This is why the problem is deeper than Gen Z hates phone calls. The real issue is that many people no longer feel safe being imperfect in real time. That changes how you socialize, how you date, how you work, even how you ask for help. Some people delay important appointments for weeks because they cannot make one phone call. Others rehearse simple conversations for an hour beforehand. Some stare at the ringing screen until it stops, then immediately feel guilty afterward. And over time, something subtle happens to identity. You begin seeing yourself as bad at communication, even when that is not true, because the brain confuses unfamiliarity with incapability. But this pattern is not random. It is adaptation. Your nervous system adapted to an environment where communication became curated instead of spontaneous, where response time became flexible, where silence could be edited away, where identity became something managed carefully through screens. So no, your brain is not broken. It is responding logically to the environment it practiced in. But there is still a problem, because human connection cannot fully survive inside controlled communication forever. Real relationships require unpredictability, emotion, interruption, misunderstanding, recovery. That is how trust forms, not through perfect responses, but through emotional presence. And this is where most people misunderstand confidence. Confidence is not the absence of awkwardness. It is the nervous system learning that awkwardness is survivable. That is why avoiding phone calls forever usually increases anxiety instead of reducing it. Your brain never gets updated evidence. It never learns. I can handle this. So how do you retrain that response without forcing yourself into fake extroversion? The answer is not just be confident. The brain does not respond well to shame. It responds to gradual safety. First, reduce the unpredictability. Before a difficult call, write down 3 simple points you want to say. Not a script, just anchors. This works because anxiety overloads working memory. Your prefrontal cortex becomes less efficient under stress. Simple notes reduce cognitive load. Your brain stops trying to hold everything at once. For example, before calling to book an appointment, write, my name, the date I need. One question. That tiny structure calms the nervous system more than people realize. Second, stop treating pauses like failures. In conversation psychology, silence only feels catastrophic because your brain interprets it as social danger. But pauses are normal processing moments. People think while speaking. Healthy conversations breathe. The more you stop panicking during silence, the less your nervous system associates conversation with threat. A simple example. Instead of rushing to fill every quiet moment, let 2 seconds exist naturally. Most people will not even notice. Third, practice low-stakes exposure. Not dramatic exposure, tiny exposure. Behavioral psychology shows the brain rewires through repeated safe experiences, not intellectual understanding. You do not overcome phone anxiety by thinking differently. You overcome it by surviving enough ordinary calls that your nervous system updates its prediction. One short call to order food. One quick voice conversation instead of texting. Small repetitions teach safety. Fourth, separate communication from performance. This changes everything. Many anxious people unconsciously treat every conversation like an evaluation. But conversations are not exams. They are shared attention. The goal is not flawless delivery. The goal is connection. When you stop monitoring yourself every second, your brain has more energy available for actual listening. And ironically, you become more socially natural because attention moves outward instead of inward. In the end, phone anxiety is not really about phones. It is about what happens when a generation raised on controlled communication suddenly has to exist unedited, in real time, with another human being. And maybe that is why these moments feel so emotionally intense. Because live conversation leaves no time to construct a safer version of yourself. Only the present version, the unfinished version, the human version. But maybe that is also where real connection begins. Not in perfectly managed responses, not in endlessly rewritten messages, but in the small, imperfect moments your nervous system keeps trying to avoid. The slight pause, the awkward laugh, the unscripted response. The moment you realize the conversation did not destroy you, and little by little, your brain starts learning something new. That being heard in real time is not always dangerous. Sometimes it is how you finally feel real.